The meeting to order, and under item A4 would ask for a roll call of members who are present this evening.
Mr. Allen?
Here.
Mr. McClellan? Here. Mr. Melcher?
Here.
Mr. Roth?
Here.
Mr. Yarger?
Here.
Mr. Wall?
Here.
Mrs. Heim? Here.
Okay, now on to item A5. Mr. Trout, are there any revisions of the agenda this evening?
None this evening, Mr. Roth.
Okay, we'll now go to item B1. This is an opportunity for public comment for members of our community to address the board, typically on issues that are on the agenda this evening. This evening we do have Sean Myers has asked to address the board this evening on the public comment section. So, Mr. Myers, if you would come forward to the microphone over here.
Hello, yeah, my name is Sean Myers. This is concerning the, from what I understand, the $6+ million allocation that's being discussed this evening. I realize I have a time frame. I'll try to be brief. I have two kids in the school system, and when I put them in the school system back 2020, I noticed, in my opinion, something pretty obvious. There was a push to move the kids from the schools back into the homes. This was mostly COVID related. We brought about the e-learning and things like that. Which, in my opinion, created quite a bit of hardship on a lot of people. It wasn't all COVID related. The Wednesday morning delays were already in place. COVID came and went. E-learning did not. In fact, it got codified into the schedule. It increased. It accelerated. Here we are in 2023. It has morphed into synchronous learning. We now have 2-hour delays on Wednesdays, every fourth Wednesday. With the added hardships to homes and the kids being home, I've even had multiple complaints, my own children, complaining about this, on and on. As a parent, I took it upon myself to look into what could be this incentive. My background is process accounting. I looked at your budget. So, quick breakdown that I saw, it basically, half of my children's school experience is in the form of education from the education fund that is paid for primarily by the state of Indiana. The other half of that is the resources, the facilities, the buses, and things that provide them the infrastructure in order to get this education. That comes to a tune of roughly $70 million for 2024. That would be a 60-40 ratio, but almost $6 million is already being siphoned off to go into the operating expenses. That's almost $6 million that could be put toward education. Now we're being asked for another $6 million to go toward further infrastructure, so that's why it's about 50-50. So $6 million is upwards of 10% of the 2024 $70 million budget. So that's quite a bit of an expense, in my opinion. I realize that's going to be, expensed out over a number of years, but as the data that I looked up, this is in a county where the enrollment is going down by an average of 1% year over year. We're down to 4,800 students. We're paying more and more every year for the facilities for these students. So the math that I found of the $25 million that comes from local taxes into 4,800 students, that's $5,200 per student. We can break that down into roughly 180 school days per year, 7 hours per day. The taxpayers of this county pay just over $4 per student per hour to be in a school that's open. That's what we're paying for. So when something like a 2-hour fog delay happens, my accounting tells me that $40,000 of school time paid for by the taxpayers were wasted. If the premise is to get the students to schools safely and on time, then I don't know what a bus costs, but $40,000 for a 2-hour fog delay. Tonight we're discussing $6 million for building renovations. If getting the kids to school safely was the issue, maybe $6 million for buses. That would alleviate snow and school delays. These synchronous learning days, which have now replaced the snow day, which we don't get to do anymore, we'll just put them in front of a screen for a few hours, call that. That's about $140,000 of taxpayer money. My math may be on or off. The half-hour delays, the 2-hour delays clock in around $700,000 per year of time that the taxpayers have paid for these schools to be open that are being systematically closed. That's a lot of staff development. As a taxpayer, I pay for my kids to be in school. If you need to develop your staff, you can do that around the students or after the students. So the moral of this is back to What's the incentive? Well, in my opinion, what I found was, well, the incentive is the $20 million a year in operating costs. Every day that a school is closed, every hour that a school is closed, that's a savings, and that's a real number. And I don't have those numbers, but the accountants have those numbers. There's a cost in savings, electricity, sewage, water, toilet paper, supplies, staff. All these things are minimized when the school is closed, yet the taxpayers are still billed the same amount and expense the same amount. At least that's my understanding. So to me, that's, in my mind, what provided a monetary incentive for school closures, and I have seen that, in my mind, progressing since I've been a parent in the school system. The snow delays, school delays, So if, in fact, there is an actual amount of savings that these delays and closings, synchronous learning days, e-learning days, whatever the reason is given to close the school for that day, if that translates into an actual monetary amount, then that's an amount that the school corporation is saving from the taxes that are already paid from the taxpayers and are pushing the burden of the care of these kids back onto the homes where they should be learning in the school. Now they're trying to learn in the homes. 2 working parents, single working parents, this puts a large burden on them, puts a burden on the child. That results in loss of work, increased child costs, and children being left home alone, right? And maybe that's fine for some teenagers to be, but I'm not leaving my second grader home alone all day. I either have to find child care or I have to leave my job for the day, and all these subsequent costs add up. So, in my opinion, this trend is in the wrong direction. As a taxpayer, as a parent, I want the schools open more. I want these Wednesdays to be going back to an 8-hour or a regular school, 7-hour school day. We need after-school programs. We need pre-K. And so when I ask myself, is $6 million in building renovations really benefiting the children and the students, which are the customers of this corporation, paid for by the taxpayers, the customers are the children. So will this actually benefit their time in school? Will it benefit their education? Will it benefit anything? If so, I'm all for it. I would love to see the buildings renovated and all of that. But when I see, kids being left at home, when I see burdens being put on families, I think maybe there's better use for $6 million. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board during the public comment portion of the meeting? All right, no one else having come forward, we'll move on to item C1, core values discussion.
During this time of the board meetings, what we like to do is honor our students and staff for a job well done, and tonight's no exception for the first night that we have met here at Huntington North High School Cafeteria. So this evening, we're going to recognize a group of students and their coach and also a teacher. So at this time, Mr. Peters, are you ready to
Yes, we're ready.
lead us through this part of it then?
Our first individual teacher we want to recognize this evening is Brenda Bentley. Brenda shares her expertise with the Art Education Association of Indiana. Brenda Bentley is our art teacher at Riverview Middle School. Brenda is very active in the art scene at the district, state, and national level. Brenda has been chosen as a presenter at upcoming art teacher conferences. The Riverview Art Club is thriving under Brenda's direction, and interests and students' interests and passion for the arts is on a steady upward trajectory. We thank you for your continued support of the arts through your daily endeavors and extracurricular activities, and for sharing your expertise with future educators through conferences and discussions. Brenda Bentley, art teacher, Riverview Middle School. Next up, we have Huntington North Boys Tennis. Core value, high expectations, high achievement, and accountability. The boys varsity tennis is being awarded tonight for their successes throughout the 2023 season. The team earned their fifth, notice I said fifth, consecutive sectional championship under Peter Kitchen's direction in the Northeast 8 Conference. Max Fusselman, Braden Christiansen, and Matt Doss all earned spots in all conference in singles, while Mason Klein and Dale Schweiler earned a spot in the all-conference doubles. We'd also like to recognize tonight Quinn Young, Peyton Huff, and Isaac Flieger are also being recognized tonight for their successes throughout the season as well. Congratulations to Peter Kitchen on earning 5 consecutive sectional championships. Awesome job. Congratulations. Parents? Congratulations, guys. Well done.
All right, thank you, everyone. If you're here just for that portion, feel free to stay for the whole meeting, but you can also take off. We understand. We'll now move on to item D1, HCCSC and Ivy Tech Memorandum of Understanding for Dual Credit.
Absolutely. Good evening. I believe you all have a copy of the MOU in your packet, so I'm just going to walk you through a little bit. It's simply a document that outlines Ivy Tech and Huntington North's responsibility in delivering dual credit in the high school setting. I know the appendix is kind of longer, so I summarized the numbers for you. What that shows is that we're doing a combined total of 76.5 dual credits with just Ivy Tech. So it's important to note that Huntington North has 4 other dual credit partners, so this isn't all the dual credit, this is just Ivy Tech. We have 7 teachers teaching dual credit with Ivy Tech this year. And what the MOU doesn't show you, but what I have access to in Ivy Tech system, is the number of students that are impacted. And with our full year classes and then fall only, so we've done registration for the fall and the full year, that's 425 students who are getting dual college credit for free, which is a huge savings to their families. It helps the students enter college sometimes at a higher ranking. So it's really exciting, and then we'll do spring enrollments in January. So yeah, that's just a quick overview of the Ivy Tech MOU. Are there any questions?
Nope. All right.
All right, thank you.
No questions having been asked, I would entertain a motion regarding the proposed memorandum.
Make a motion we approve the dual credit MOU between HCCSC and Ivy Tech.
Did that get picked up? Just so everyone knows, on these mics, we have to really speak into them.
Make a motion to approve the MOU between HCCSC and Ivy Tech.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with Ivy Tech. All right, motion passes 7-0. We'll now move on to item D2, Professional Development K-12 2-hour delay presentation.
Mr. Brimbury and I have the privilege and honor to work with 2 outstanding professional educators. Marissa Tinkle is our elementary PD coordinator, and Lynn Brown is our secondary PD coordinator. And we've asked them to come forward and just do a brief presentation to kind of share with you and give you a snapshot of what we have been doing with professional development across the district during those 2-hour delays. Thank you, Marissa, for being here.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity to present to you. So we are marrying two priorities. The first priority is from the state. It is the science of reading. And then the second priority is our HCCSC priority, and that's our MTSS process. And unlike previous things that are coming down from the state and our priorities, these actually marry really, really well. And so I've been super excited to prioritize these and show how they go together. So Cindy, if you could go to the next slide. I want to first explain what we've been doing. I think if you back it up. There you go. So on this slide, you can see that there are two models that explain the science of reading. The first being Scarborough's reading rope, and the second one being down below in that purple bar, and that's the simple view of reading. And if I can summarize those, what that means is the combination of language comprehension, the way we process language, and the ability to recognize words, or word recognition, lifting words off the page, that combination leads to reading comprehension. And so while that seems really simple, that's actually a very complex process, not only to teach, but to fully grasp as readers. So during our PD days, we have been looking at not only the science of reading, but the MTSS process. The first, you can go ahead and go to the next one. The first 3 months were spent, or I'm sorry, the first 4 months were spent on that Tier 1. So this is the MTSS process, and that shows that Tier 1 is our core instruction, and that states, in theory, that our Tier 1 core instruction should meet the needs of about 80% of our students' needs. And then we move up from there, where we have to do targeted intervention and more intensive intervention. And so these first 4 months, we've been working on our Tier 1 instruction, again, working on that word recognition and language comprehension piece. So you can see up here, these are the resources that have been provided to our teachers, and this is what we have been trying to really dive into and use to the best of our ability to not only teach, but get our students to master word recognition and language comprehension. The first 3 flex days, we worked on language comprehension using our interactive read-alouds and our shared reading, trying to put those reading units together. And then these next 2 will be working on word recognition so that we can eventually get to that skilled reading. So you can see in the months of December and January, we're going to work on Tier 2 instruction. That is where we target our interventions for students who aren't meeting or aren't mastering the concepts and the standards at that core 1, or that core instruction, that Tier 1 level. And so that's where we're going for the next 2 months. And the last thing that I share is this quote. It's from a children's book, and it's a little boy and a horse talking to one another. And the quote says, "I can't see a way through," said the boy. "Can you see your next step?" "Yes." "Just take that," said the horse. And that's really been our theme quote for this year, that we're throwing a lot at them, and we're asking our teachers, just take the next step. And so that is our flex days in elementary.
Thank you, Marissa. Any questions for Marissa while she's still there at the mic? Okay. All right. Thank you, Marissa. Lynn Brown, secondary PD coordinator.
Good evening. The state of Indiana has done something brilliant, which doesn't happen all the time at the Department of Education, but it has certainly happened maybe for the first time in my career. They have created an island process that actually tells us what's going to be on the test before we take the test. That has never happened before. So we are spending a huge amount of time on 2 things this year in secondary. For 6 through 8, we're looking at those island tests. We are looking at exactly what skill sets are on those tests and rearranging pretty much everything that we do on a daily basis so our kids will be successful the first time out. I am so excited because we've been traveling around talking to school systems, and we are ahead of the curve on that by a long shot. So our kids are going to be well served next year. The second thing the state did was it created the SAT as a graduating exam, which almost everybody thought was a crazy idea. And I kept saying to teachers here at the high school, wait, we're going to know what's on the graduating exam for the first time ever. So yes, the bar's like here, but we know exactly what we're shooting at for the very first time. I'm super proud of our high school teachers. We are a little bit higher than the state average for SAT here in Huntington North High School. That's not a small accomplishment. They completely changed the test, however, for this spring. It is the first time ever that it's a digital test. They've shortened the test significantly, but made the test questions far more complicated. So we have spent several of our 2-hour delays looking at test sample questions, and then looking at what can science do to help that, what can social studies do to help that. Going alongside that, we're looking at things like the science of reading, but that looks very different for high school and middle school teachers. We're looking at how do we help kids do college-level reading? How do we help them look at technical reading for their CTE programs? How do we help them look at graphic organizers that they would use at a professional level, not just what they would use for a daily, day in and day out? We've also designed some pieces for our paraprofessionals. They've been looking at health safety pieces. They've looked at CPR. They've looked at what you do for specific kids in the classroom. We're looking at trauma-informed instruction across the school. While we have done trauma-informed in the past, we're looking at updating and renewing. And so we have a number of pieces that we're doing throughout the year, but all of them kind of tie to either student safety or those test questions that we're going to look at here in the spring for the first time in a different way. I would just like to take a moment and thank the 3 principals that I work with, because they have asked me to do 6 through 12 this year, and bless their hearts, they are picking up some slack for me, and they have been incredibly good to work with and to think through problem solving and what we can do to serve our kids. Pat has been very gracious. He occasionally teases me about, are we keeping track of how many papers I'm running for the middle school so we can charge Jamie and Rachel for those. Once in a while he asks me that question, but they've been great. Our teachers have been amazing. They are asking for help in specific things, and they are pushing us to give them that help so they can serve our kids, so that we can raise up those test scores and truly represent Huntington County the way that we really believe that we can in the future and draw people to us. I thank you for all the support you guys have given us along the way. It's an amazing thing when I talk to professional development coordinators across the state, and they don't have what we have here at Huntington County, people who truly have vision and look forward to what we can do to help our teachers and our students. Thank you very much. Do you have any, look, I just took some pictures in case you thought we were drinking coffee on those days. Do you have any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right, any questions on the presentations about professional development that's occurring during our 2-hour delays? All right, we'll then move on to item E1, 2023 General Obligation Bond Hearing on Additional Appropriation. So the next item on the agenda is for the board to hold a hearing on the proposed maintenance projects and additional appropriation of funds for those projects. If you're interested in speaking at the hearing, please make sure you have signed the sign-in sheet, which should include your name and address. After a presentation by the administration and our advisors, there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments about the projects. At the hearing, we will ask that each person limit their comments to 3 minutes and that the topic be limited to the proposed projects under consideration. The notices of this hearing were published in the Huntington Herald Press as legally required. And at this time, I will ask the Chief Financial Officer, Becky Smith, to explain the purpose of this hearing.
Thank you, President Roth, Superintendent Trout, members of the board, and community. Tonight, we bring you the information for our 2023 General Obligation Bond. And pursuant to the Indiana Code 20-26-7-37, before a school corporation may spend more than $1 million to build, repair, or alter a school building that will be financed by lease or bonds, it must hold a public hearing at which explanations of the potential value of the projects to the school corporation and community are given. This hearing this evening and consideration of resolutions establish the maximum financial terms and proposed projects. And then I can just go ahead and move into the need for our projects and just kind of give you a little overview of what this, this goes to. And this is for renovations and such throughout our district, mainly maintenance improvements, roofing improvements, HVAC improvements, site improvements, and the purchase of equipment or technology for all improvements of our school facilities. And just want to give you a little background on this debt service. We have three main funds in the district. One is our education fund, which the gentleman earlier talked about. Most of our funding for that fund comes from our tuition support, our basic grant from the state based on our average daily membership enrollment. Then we have our operations fund, which is the overall operations of the district. You would think of facilities, central office, technology, transportation, those type of things. The funding for that particular fund comes from a maximum levy established by the state of Indiana. So we can't do any more than a certain maximum in that fund. And then last but not least, we have our debt service fund, and that is a totally separate fund that's outside of our education or operations fund. So it does not take monies from either one of those funds to do these projects. So it's a totally separate fund. And with this fund, if you've seen through my budget presentation that we've given, it is a tax rate based on need. And there is a new legislative session through that last legislative session where a school corporation, they put a limit on the tax rate that you can raise for that, and that is 40 cents. So anything over 40 cents must go through a referendum process. So we here at Huntington make sure that we keep our debt service under that threshold, and we're trying to maintain and stabilize our tax rate and our debt service fund. If you recall in the past, the tax rate has, I call it a roller coaster, where it's gone down when we have needs, then it goes back up for the taxpayers. When it stabilizes or falls off, then it goes back down. We at Huntington have decided that it is better for our taxpayers to stabilize that tax rate so they don't see that roller coaster ride. And then also, as debt comes off, we put other debt in the same areas and amounts as the other that we do not go over that threshold. So we are maintaining our threshold that we had from 2022, and we're maintaining that moving forward. And all of this is for regular maintenance, repair, and renovations that we have throughout the district, such as it can be mechanical, it can do roofing, paving, those type of things that we don't have enough with that maximum levy in our operations fund to be able to do. And this is customary for all districts in the state of Indiana to utilize that debt service fund. And that is another reason why the state established that maximum amount, that if the district wants to go over that amount, then they have to go through the referendum process, which I'm glad that they did. So it does control schools to maintain that rate for the community. So just wanted to kind of go through that. And then I think next we will hear from our financial advisors on the financial impact that this will go for this bond. And we will now hear from Tyler from Baker Tilly.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. As Becky said, I'm Tyler Luffelholtz with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, and I will be walking through the financial implications of the proposed project. First, I'll start off by showing you what your current outstanding debt looks like. You can see that in 2023, your total debt service payments equal just over $9 million. That's about $9.1 million. And then without issuing any bonds, you would be dropping to about $5.3 million in 2024. So what that drop allows you to do is to issue additional bonds and fill those payments in where it's dropping and have minimal tax impact to your debt service tax rate. The next page is just the detail behind that slide. But if we look at page 4, you can see the calculation of your general obligation bonding capacity, and that is 2% of 1/3 of your net assessed value. So after taking out the GO bonds that you already have outstanding, that leaves you with about $12.68 million that you have capacity to issue. So anything you issue under that can be issued as general obligation bonds. So what we've done is we've structured a $6,105,000 bond issue to be paid off in just over 3 years. Using conservative interest rates, we estimate the total interest expense over the life of the bonds to be about $509,000, and we would estimate a debt service fund tax rate impact of about 4.3 cents above your current rate, and that your debt service tax rate did drop this year, so really we would just be taking you back up to close to where you were in 2022. So, but compared to this year, it's about a 4.3 cent impact, and that would take your debt service tax rate to about 39 cents. The next chart shows how the new debt would look alongside your existing debt, and you can see that we'd be paying them back within 3 years. And, you can see that the black line there is your estimated debt service tax rate, so you'd see a little jump in 2024, but stay there for 2 years, and then it would drop as those payments decrease in 2026. This is just the detail of that slide. And then on the next one, you can see we have calculated the estimated taxpayer impact for different types of property taxpayers. And I won't read through all of these lines, but I will point out the median home value within the school district is about $113,000. And someone with that value home would see an annual impact of about $28.97 for those 2 years that we would anticipate the rate to increase. For each acre of agricultural land, we'd see about 83-cent annual impact. And for every $100,000 of rental or commercial property, we would estimate about $43.70 per year for those 2 years. But that is all of the information that I have to present, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Tyler. We will now open the public hearing. Remember, if you would like to speak, please sign in on the sheet which is located on the podium. As I mentioned earlier, we ask that you state your name and address, limit your comments to the proposed projects and financing, and keep any comments to 3 minutes. Please try and avoid being repetitive if possible. And I'll go over and get the sign-in sheet, but if anyone would like to come forward during this time, now is your time to do that, and we'll open the public hearing. I'm assuming, Mrs. Smith, that there's no signatures on there already? Oh, okay.
There was a yellow sheet of paper there.
I think it's on the back of your, yep, there we go. Okay. All right, so once again, if you would like to ask questions, now is the opportunity during this public hearing portion. All right, no one having come forward, we'll go ahead and move on to, I think we're on to Mr. Long, is that correct?
Yep. So we are up to the next agenda item, which is the adoption of the 2023 project resolution. So Eric, thank you for coming.
Yes, my pleasure to be here. Once again, my name is Eric Long with Ice Miller in Indianapolis. We serve as bond counsel to the school corporation. Here to present 3 resolutions for your consideration this evening with respect to general obligation bonds. The first of those is the project resolution. This is a resolution that's required when a school corporation is planning to spend more than $1 million for improvements in any given facility. This resolution contains the estimated hard and soft construction costs, and the total cost of the project, as Tyler just showed us, was at $6,105,000. It also contains the estimated tax impact, which is also in Tyler's presentation.
All right, thank you, Eric. Could I please have a motion and a second to adopt the project resolution?
I'll make a motion that we adopt the project resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to adopt the project resolution. All right, motion passes 7-0. Eric, could you please summarize the additional appropriation resolution?
Yes, of course. This is a procedural resolution. So since we're having the school corporation receive bond proceeds before the end of this calendar year, this resolution provides for the approval of the school corporation to actually appropriate or spend those bond proceeds once they are received at closing.
Okay, and this is under item E4, I believe, on the agenda. And so could I please have a motion regarding adoption of the additional appropriation resolution?
Make a motion to approve the additional appropriations resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion before we vote? All right, hearing nothing further, we'll now vote on the motion to adopt the additional appropriation resolution. Motion passes 7-0. We'll now go to E5. Eric, if you could please summarize the final bond resolution.
Yes, the last one for your consideration with respect to the GO bonds. This resolution contains a number of the financial aspects of the bonds themselves. So like the project resolution, it contains the maximum total cost of the projects. It also contains the maximum interest rate that's going to be accepted for those bonds on the certain bid date. We're working together with the folks at Baker Tilly on that. Other financial terms such as the first and last interest payment dates that are permitted, again, within the confines of the presentation that Tyler showed this evening. Also a number of specifics on the bond. So it'll show things like what the form of the bond is going to look like for the ultimate purchaser, things of that nature that just tidy up all the authorizations for the closing. It also authorizes the execution of closing certificates after the bond sale, but before the bond closing, because there will be about a 3-week time span between when the bond's priced and when you actually get the money at closing.
All right, thank you, Eric. Could I please have a motion regarding the proposed final bond resolution?
Motion to approve the final bond resolution as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion before we vote on this motion? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. We'll now move on to item A6, resolution for additional appropriation for operations fund. I believe we'll look back to Mrs. Smith for that one. Is that correct? Okay.
We are asking the board this evening to approve and adopt a resolution for additional appropriation or operations fund. When we do the budget process, it is unknown at that time what we are going to use any excess or cash balance for. During the year, of course, we've had some additional information that's come up in different situations where we've spent more on supplies and things that came up through emergency situations. So in our operations fund, we would be maxed out on our appropriation, and that's the approval to spend. So this additional amount of, I believe, is $500,000? $750. Okay, I couldn't remember which one we ended up with. $750,000 allows us that flexibility from now till the end of the year to make sure that we don't run out of appropriation. And all this is in the same confines that we've had during the budget process, and we have the cash to support this additional appropriation. So we would ask the boards for approval for this additional appropriation to our operations fund as presented.
All right, thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the proposed additional appropriation resolution ordinance?
Make a motion to approve the additional resolution, adopt the resolution for additional appropriations for the operations fund.
Did we get that?
Did it come out right? Do I need
I
to
think
repeat?
so.
I'll second it.
All right, Mr. Allen seconded that. Any questions or discussion before we vote?
Just want to make sure that, again, this is coming out of cash balance. That's where that money's coming from.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No additional taxes or anything.
All right, hearing no additional discussion or questions, we'll vote on the motion. All right, that motion passes 7-0. We will now move on to item E7, additional hours.
Yes, in your board packet, what I'm requesting for your approval this evening is the additional hours invoice from our CFO, Mrs. Becky Smith. This is in excess of work well beyond and about just 399 extra hours that Becky has spent just between June and just 2 weeks ago within that. This is a massive amount of hours that she has helped us, and me specifically, with rewriting all the comp models from across the district. So anyone in this district who receives a paycheck has had a new revised and updated comp model. And so, Becky, thank you. I am grateful for all of that that's there, but I'm asking for your approval of that this evening.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion regarding the request for additional hours?
Make a motion to approve the additional hours as presented.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion or comments before we vote?
Most of these items, Mr. Trout, look like additional things that are not normally in there.
No, what this was is, that's why we spelled out the invoice for you and the specifics for it, to make sure that you clearly understood what these hours were for. She and I worked a lot of weekends through the summer and into the fall, trying to get this all rewritten and done. But also, she's given us a much reduced rate at this also along the way. So this well exceeds our initial contracted services agreement that we had with her for a 2-year plan.
The reason I was asking is just making sure we didn't need to go back and amend that contract.
Not at this time.
Yeah, that's what I was just verifying.
We are reworking our processes and procedures so that we will not get into this same type of situation again in the very near future.
Any other discussion? I would just like to thank Becky for all the additional time that she spent, in particular with our contract negotiations that we just had, and very thankful that you, working with administration, were able to come to a 2-year agreement with our teachers that I think will save some headache a year from now, since we're locked in for 2 years. So thank you for your additional work.
Second that, thank you.
And I'll go ahead and call a vote on the motion. Motion passes 7-0. We'll now move to item E8, service contract for grant writing services and support.
Yes, the next agenda item that you have is for grant writing services agreement with Dr. Keisha Pleasant. Dr. Pleasant, what we have there are the specifics for that. It specifies that at $100 an hour for her services and support. Just to give you a little glimpse into what Keisha has done for our district even up to this point in time, she spent 10 hours helping us write the last grant that we went for, as you saw in the presentation here from Lynn and Marissa. some of the PD and development we have done. And we just learned this past week that with Keisha's help and support and Jay and Chuck's leadership, that we secured a $403,000 grant. I have no doubt that without Keisha's help, I think Jay and Chuck would concur with this, that we would not have gotten that. So the $100 for her 10 hours of time to equate that to $403,000 for additional supports for our staff, and that's a competitive grant with the state of Indiana. And I'll just say a lot of my colleagues across the state did not get this grant, and they found out that we did. I got several phone calls. And I hope they're not watching tonight so they don't know that Keisha is our person that helped us. But we are already looking into preschool grants, early childhood grants, daycare grants through school districts and all of those things. And we're currently working through some of those other grant opportunities with Keisha right now. And so, Jay, you've worked closely with her. Anything that you would like to tell the board about this agreement that you found personally? Yep. Right. So you're going to get that grant at the next school board meeting, but I wanted to just connect the dots for you here, as much like that you have seen all of Becky's worth to help us with our 2-year agreement with our teachers and rewriting the comp models for every employee group. Keisha has had profound impact on this district in just a short period of time in securing that $400,000 grant for us. So I'm just recommending your approval of this services agreement.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trout. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the proposed contract for grant writing?
Motion to approve the service contract with Dr. Keisha Pleasant for the grant writing services and support.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, or discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. All right, motion passes 7-0. We'll now go on to item E9, the always exciting request to dispose of obsolete equipment and vehicles.
Board, for your action item tonight, request to dispose of obsolete equipment and vehicles. I know that you received the list. Some are for auction, and they do match up on our bus replacement plan, and so that's important. Some other items are for scrap, but you can see the title, the entire list on your board docs. So we're asking for approval of that tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Brimberry. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the request to dispose of obsolete equipment and vehicles?
I'll make a motion to approve the request to dispose of the obsolete equipment as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Give that one to Mr. McClellan. Any questions, comments, or discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion. Motion passes 7-0. Now go to item E10, Lowe Associates Payroll Financial Software.
Yes, for your approval this evening, what I am seeking is for us to change financial accounting software. We have reached a point in our system where, quite frankly, we have outgrown what we are currently using and not utilizing we're being hamstrung by what we need to be doing within our business software. Lao, I guess is the best way of saying it, matches perfectly with the state of Indiana accounting system. And by moving to this direction, our goal ultimately is to work more efficiently and more effectively within our whole entire business department, and therefore the district for us to do this. Becky, do you want to say a couple of points about this agreement and and the why behind it there, please?
Sure. Another thing with this is this impacts all of business services and human resources. So this helps us do seamless all the way from applicant tracking into hiring the employee into the payroll system. Currently, like Mr. Trout indicated, we've kind of like outgrown our current system. Our current system is more like an accrual basis accounting. It's not just Indiana accounting, so it's nationwide accounting, which is totally different. Lau Associates is a cash basis Indiana accounting system and HR system. So with this, it has establishes internal controls. It covers all those areas that the State Board of Accounts requires of us without having to piecemeal it with other softwares, i.e. our current software. So this helps us with all of our audit regulations, saves time, it streamlines things, and more things are electronically done instead of having so many old-fashioned paperwork and things like that. It has the ability to upload quotes, those type of things, and the approval process going all the way from a purchase requisition into a purchase order, then to actually paying the bill. So all of that, I believe, that will help us through this conversion. This conversion will take approximately 6 months to do, so it should be complete sometime this spring. And what they will do is go back to this current year and make sure that all that is put back in, because reminder, our budgets go calendar year, January through December, so they will backtrack and put all the information in for this year, so we're have our whole year to do that. So that'll help us all with our state reporting. They have everything built in that we don't have to run, 20 different reports and finagle them all together. They have all this seamlessly already integrated within their software because they are just Indiana. So we're very pleased with them. I have worked with this company in the past at previous districts, and their customer service is, just phenomenal, along with their software. So they keep on updating their software and to make that more streamlined, and also working with our technology on different aspects with Amazon, AWS, and those different types of things that we can do with the cloud, and those things still staying in regulations with the audit internal controls and all the technology controls also. I'd be happy to answer any more questions the board may have at this time.
Does this do anything for ECA?
Yes, it's both.
So it does both, so we'll
yes,
have
it
one
does.
system now
So,
for both
yes.
ECA and?
Yes, it's a module. It's just like the HR is a module within that. So yes, it will include, it's called Easy Accounting. So it basically mimics exactly our district accounting, and it's just another module. So that means that anyone that would be working in it at the ECA level, then it's the same exact process across the board. So it's easier on professional development, training for any kind of turnover or anything like that, that we're working with the same things at the district level and the school level.
So when it comes time for State Board of Accounts, they'll have one file that we'll have to pull for everything?
Absolutely. Yes.
So the total, just license and services, just so you know, so the public will know, is $263,000 with that. So just that's the cost of going through this conversion with that. And so to be transparent, I want to make sure that we have that. Also within that, and you look in your board package, you will notice that you get the support hours initially is 590 hours, and it breaks it down of what we would get during that point in time too, throughout this whole first year process. So they have it all broken down there for you, so you can see that also. So that is our recommendation this evening.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the proposed agreement with Lau?
Make a motion to approve the purchase of Lau, transitioning it to our financial system.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any, did you get a second? Okay. Any questions, comments, or discussion before we vote? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. So now we'll move on to F1, HCCSC remodeling timeline.
Board and public, I'm honored to have Terry Thornsberry here tonight with us to give us a informational item on remodeling that's going on in different parts of our district, but in particular at the high school. So Terry, I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Brimberry. Terry Thornsberry, Principal Architect for Meridian Architectural Design. And without the slideshow, we can just point and show and tell. You guys do have a physical copy of this as well, but give Cindy a second. So we have been working on multiple projects now for multiple years throughout the corporation, and things are going well. This space was recently completed in the last couple months over fall break. All the new serving line equipment came in, and it looks phenomenal. So, and the Rich cranked down to like 60 to make sure Cindy's nice and cool. Yeah. So it's turned out to be a great space. We've really enjoyed working for the school corporation, and this project was a big hit. So. I have it on a USB drive too, in my pocket if you want it. All right.
Sorry, Terry.
Nope.
Thanks for your
Perfectly
patience.
fine. I love technology. So, all right. So this is an update of multiple projects. We're going to start off with the various schools mechanical replacement project. As you can see, it's Andrews, Flint Springs, Lincoln, Horseman, Crestview, and Riverview. This project's nearly complete. We still have chillers going in at Riverview, Andrews, and Lincoln. Next slide, please, Cindy. There's a picture of one of the buildings. You can see where that concrete pad is and the benches. That's where we freed up space from old ice tanks. So there's now more room in the enclosures and consolidated cooling down to that unit there next to the recycling bins. And construction, like I said, is nearly complete. Those remaining chillers are being installed and controls are being programmed as we speak. So next slide. There's some pictures of the new boilers. Those are all installed and online, up and running, and new pumps and controls are installed and online as well. Next slide. So that project will be wrapped up by the end of the year, and then since we're running out of any warm weather, except today was really nice, we're going to end up firing up those 3 remaining chillers. It'll probably be early next spring, and that'll wrap up that project at that point. So warranties won't go into play until the equipment's completely up and running, so we're going to have staggered equipment warranties on all that equipment. So next is the Huntington North High School. Sorry, Cindy, go back one slide. The fire alarm system for this building is now done, minus some paperwork. So, and it does work. I've heard that it does work on Friday nights. So it's great that it works, and fire marshal's good to go. Everybody's happy, so good stuff there. Next slide, please. Next is the big mechanical project for this building, and that is the full replacement of the mechanical equipment and controls in the penthouses. There are 2 of them on the roof of the building and throughout the building, mostly the original 1969, 1970 equipment on the building. Next slide.
So Terry, when I'm out and about, probably the number one question about the next level of renovation at this place is where are we? I want them to hear it from you. Where are we on those units coming in for those penthouses?
Right. So construction is scheduled to start spring of 24. We're coming up on,
right,
and then continue on through the fall of 25. Daikin is the brand name of most of the equipment that's going in those penthouses. And Daikin, the last time we talked to them a few months ago, said, don't ask again until January, and we'll give you updates on the dates. So that's our plan, work with PDP, the contractor, get updated dates. So
okay.
I'll update you as soon as I know more.
Okay, thank you.
Right. We're about 99.9% through the submittal process. We're just doing a few things on controls to get that wrapped up. Again, planned update January 24, and then there will be some small, like we have this fin tube that's on the windows throughout the building, and the small heaters that you see. That kind of work's actually going to start beginning of next year. So we're going to go ahead and get some of these things rolling that are inside the building that'll be after hours or during school in spaces that won't be disruptive. Next slide, please. Cafeteria renovation, like I said, this one's going to come off of our presentation because it is done. The space turned out great, so we're really happy about where things are going with this space. Next slide. Security for the building, doors and hardware. Currently, this project is under construction, and security cameras are going in. I think we have about 156 cameras throughout the building. And so if you go out the hallways and look up and you see big cameras hanging from the ceiling, those are the new ones, and they're already live and active. And so they can see everything that's going on in the building, and they said they can finally see everything everywhere. As the new cameras get installed, literally they plug them in and it works. And it's recording to the cloud. So that's great. Next slide, please. The other half of this project is the doors, exterior doors around the entire building. Those will start beginning of next year. And then we'll have some final painting and some things to do to finishes, which will happen probably during spring break. And then that project will be wrapped up around that time. Next slide, please. So family and consumer science, or home ec for those of us that were here back in the 80s and prior to that. So
Family and consumer science is getting a whole new facelift, getting away from more of the residential model that it was from Gary's time spending in there. And what was it, singles living, I think? So, right. So now, next slide, you'll see now it's all stainless steel. So it's going to be more of a semi-commercial space, easy to clean, very durable. It's going to be epoxy floors, new lighting, and be very modern in the space. So it's going to be great. Next slide, please. Again, family consumer science is all new appliances. Nothing's getting reused from the old equipment that was there. It is bidding currently right now, and bids are due next week. So planned construction for the whole thing, start and stop, summer of next year. Next slide, please. Next big one is science block renovation. So for those of you familiar with the building, you go up toward door 2 and 3. That whole block of classrooms up there, that's the science block. We're going to basically tear that down to the floor, take the ceilings out, and rebuild the all new science block, all 10 classrooms. The only thing that stays will be the planetarium dome, because we get to reuse it. And we've been working with the company that actually did that original project in 1969, 1970 for a new modern version of it. So it's going to be really nice. And we had a demo last week with the teachers and the principal. We saw what the new system will be able to do. The new system will be able to do astronomy, as well as right now they're developing the software to be also to do physics and earth science and biology. And so a lot of fun, interactive. You actually get to use a Xbox controller to use it and play with it. And they showed us where you can literally drive around the Earth or drive around Mars or do all these crazy things. So a phenomenal system for that space. But otherwise, next slide. Most of the lab spaces are going to now be pod-style design or flexible furniture with all oak wood with the natural stain on it. Next slide, please. All new electrical for that portion of the building, epoxy floors again for durability and chemical resistance for the furniture as well as the floor and everything else. Again, we're getting rid of most everything. I think they're going to keep a couple pieces of equipment that are fairly new, but otherwise it's all going to go. Mr. Broomberry is going to get a fleet of dumpsters, and we're going to clean house in there. And going to be a great transition. Next slide, please. So that design is nearly complete. We're actually going to wrap it up over the next 2 weeks and then put it out to bid in December, and then scheduled construction will start next summer of 24 and then carry on probably through into the winter of 24 and wrap that project up. So that's really going to make a change, and we're working on some things that you guys haven't seen yet, but I'll share it with you when we're done, because the outside walls of that box are going to be a big hit too that are going to play off of some of what's in here. So I'm not done with it yet, so I can't show it to you, but it's all in my head. So we'll get it out of there eventually. So I think that's the last slide. Yep. Any questions, comments?
Terry, if you could, Cindy, if you could go back to his first slide there. Right, back one. Right there, what we're planning on next is, you might talk a little bit about, with the bond work that we did this evening, and tie that into what some of our thinking is with the board about Salamonie Elementary School then.
Right. So Salamonie was built the same time this building was built, around 69 or 70. That building, like this building, has all the original equipment. The only thing that's unique about Salamonie that sets it apart is that it actually has an old steam system in it, which none of your other buildings have steam in it. That does. And in talking to Mr. Hurdle back here, he knows that his guys use duct tape, Band-Aids, whatever it takes to keep that building up and going and do a great job doing it. But the intent would be to do, like we did here, replace that entire system throughout the entire building. Because it definitely needs it. It's the oldest remaining mechanical system once this building is updated, and is in need of that refresh as well to make it more efficient. You're welcome. So, any additional questions? Again,
I know I'm the one that's like pushing. Let's get things moving.
Right.
Is there any? I guess what is the basis for science is going to benefit the most students probably. I appreciate that we're renovating facts, and I think that's going to benefit students definitely. But is there a reason we can't start mid-semester in the spring?
Logistics to move all those students, the teachers we're working with in science to figure out how because they're only going to have half of those, 5 of those out of those 12 classrooms starting the fall of '24, and they have to figure out a plan. Where are they going to move them to? How are they going to accommodate science class? How are they going to do labs? How are they going to do things? They obviously have the new from the 80s science wing just over here. But that was a big deal for them to try to figure that out, and I still think they're game planning on trying to figure out how they're going to accommodate that in hopes that we can turn those other 5 classrooms around as fast as possible. So it is a challenge. Even though this building is large, every square inch of it's used, and trying to accommodate the needs and keep things moving. And what are the next projects? We have a meeting, I think, scheduled in December with you and me to do a walking tour and to talk about what's next and where things are headed, and just let you guys get your eyes on some things and see the space and see, the condition of the building, and just talk about what we're going to do in the future.
Yeah, Terry, exactly what I was going to say. In 2 weeks, we're getting together, all of us as a board, and we're actually going to be talking what's post what you just saw today in this building. And so that process is going to begin in 2 weeks.
Right, it's end of November, not in December.
Yeah, that's
right.
okay.
Right.
And so to piggyback on what Mr. Roth is asking for is what's next?
Right.
And more importantly, how do we line that all up with financially staying within the tax rate about what we can do here also? And so we are going to start that planning. It's also one of your later board agenda items on here is talking about doing our board meetings different in 24, is because we want to start picking up some of the additional pace with these type of projects in this building as finances allow. So with all the facility studies we have done at each complex here, lining it up with what we're doing financially, that's why we're going to board work sessions in public, because we have to start having more and more of these conversations in order to determine what is post-science classrooms, what's post-HVAC. And so to keep Terry and his team overly busy, your direction in that in the winter is going to be critical as we determine next steps of where we're going in this building then.
Right. And we're always working ahead. I was in here for 3 hours before this meeting, put a ladder on top of my car, getting above ceilings and checking things out and looking at a bunch of different stuff. So we're always trying to get ahead, but once you give us the green light, we'll hit the ground running and keep moving with the next project and the next project. So.
All right, any additional questions for Terry?
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay, we'll now move on to item F2, 2023 demographic study.
Thank you, Mr. McGibbon, or Dr. McGibbon, for your patience. It's good to see you again. I know that many of you have worked with Dr. McGibbon in the past. I have had the pleasure of working with him at other districts. You know his accuracy is amazing of what he does and how he goes about doing his work. So we're looking forward to you sharing your information with us this evening. So welcome.
Thank you, John. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Everybody hearing me okay on this?
Yep.
Okay. Go back one slide, please. There's 2 very important things I want to cover before I get into the results. Number 1, don't let Rock Hill, South Carolina fool you. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne. I went to Carroll High School. My first trip to Huntington County was in 1961. You can figure out my age then from that, but I've done this district before. Most of your surrounding districts, I counted up today, 75 Indiana districts in the last 20 years, so you do quite well. Secondly, these are forecasts, they are not projections. A projection is where you take a variable, usually year-to-year survivorship, second to third, third to fourth over a 5-year period, create an algorithm, and literally project into the future based on that. Quick, accurate, not accurate, but quick, easy, cheap, very cheap, until about 1990, all you had in the way of enrollment research. But the only way a projection can be correct is what's happened over the last 5 years replicates itself over the next 5 or 10. And I don't know about anybody here. I hope I don't see the last 5 years again anytime in my lifetime. A forecast is a two-step procedure. We do a full population forecast for each one of your attendance areas. Whole population, 0 to 4 to 85 plus, male and female. And we build a fertility, a mortality, and a migration model specific to each attendance area. So it's your area's unique demographic dynamics and characteristics that drives an enrollment forecast. So it's not, we don't use state models, national, regional, it's all built specific for Huntington County and your attendance areas. Now, anytime you're doing forecasting, you have to have assumptions. These are broad socioeconomic, demographic, economic parameters that we use to build our models for the pop forecast. And the first slide is, I have a bunch of them, but I want to go through 4 of them particularly. And these are the 4 variables that have the highest amount of potential error in them. If we're going to have error in the forecast, come from these variables. Next slide. The most important one is B. We assume the 30-year fixed mortgage rate will stay between 5.5 and 5.7% for the 10 years of the forecast. Problematic because this morning it was 7.6. Okay, we're already at the top end of that. Why is this so important? This drives your housing market. 2 years ago at this time, the 30-year fixed rate was 3.5%. It's doubled in 2 years. That's never happened before in U.S. history, by the way. We're starting to see some drag on the housing market now, and it looks like Jerome Powell's going to keep his foot on the gas. They may not go up to 8 or 8.5, they'll probably slide back down to the mid-7s. I don't think we'll see below 5 again in our lifetimes. That was, last 10 years was an abnormality not to be repeated. But again, that's problematic for first-time home buyers on 2 levels. One, kids today, that's anybody in the age of 40, seen nothing but 3.5%, 4% interest rates for the last decade or so. 7.5 sounds like highway robbery. To those of us old enough to remember the 70s, 80s, and the 90s, when we get 30, I couldn't do that again if I tried. Can't lean on that. Who remember the interest rate that high? 7.5 sounds pretty cheap, okay? My first mortgage was 8.8%. We thought we were robbing the bank, okay? Also, if you're in a starter home today and you have a starter home with a 3.5 and 4, you do this on purpose, aren't you, John?
No, I did not do that on purpose, sorry. I can't be that good, Jerome, so.
Prejudice against tall people. I'll leave it be, I'll just leave it there. I'm farsighted anyway, it's probably better down there anyhow, so. If they're in a starter home with 3.5%, 4% rates, if they want to move up home, they have to pay 7%. You buy a $400,000 house 2 years ago, same one today, at the different interest rates, it's $1,000 more a month on your mortgage. So that has what's clogged up the housing market right now. People aren't selling their starter homes. Another point, during COVID, the elderly just stopped moving. Okay, usually we're seeing an increase in people downsizing right now, and that's problematic because they're not doing it. That's why you have a shortage of homes on the market right now. The elderly migration rates are just non-existent. So the developer is trying to build everything they got in the pipeline. Next slide for 2 other ones. We assume that the district will have 80 single-family new housing units constructed per year over the 10 years of the forecast. I'm not worried about that number. But above it, we assume 550 existing home sales. That's the number I'm worried about. Everybody fixates on new home construction. It's a new home, open field, new buildings there. You want to add to what you already have. The backbone of your housing market is existing home sales. 80 to 85% of your housing market in any given area in the country is existing home sales. If you don't have existing home sales, you could build 500 houses and you still wouldn't have it. So the key number there is to add those 2 together. You need about 630 new households moving in per year. just to maintain. And then, this is the state of Indiana. It's the only state in the country that has interdistrict transfers, charters, and vouchers all going on at the same time, all right? You can't look at Indiana enrollment demographic changes without looking at transfers. Then Huntington County, like most of the school districts in this state, have a negative number. And we're going to assume it stays at negative 560 per year over the next 10 years. That's both public, and public to private. Okay? According to last year's report, you're losing about 70 to Wabash, about 65 to Southern Wells, 80 to Northern Wells, and 42 to Union Township Schools. Legendary now in Indiana. Anybody know where Union Township Schools is? It's a little school district in Randolph County, 2 little townships. K through 12, I think they got about 400 students. Half of them don't even go to their own schools, and over 5,000 virtual students. I'm doing 8 presentations during this trip up here in Indiana. Every single school district we're doing has kids going to Union Township, and you're losing about 47. And it's just one of the great scams in the state right now. You're losing another. It's 384 public to public, another 170 to private. If 561 sounds real high, I'm at Westfield, Washington tomorrow night. That's the same number theirs is too. Theirs is negative 600 also. It's really a dominant and major factor. You cannot look at enrollment change in Indiana without factoring in the transfers. And now they've raised the voucher limit to $220,000. I think 96% of all households in the state with kids now qualify for private school vouchers. So that's not going to go away. Next slide, please. Okay, the number one predictive variable for population enrollment change is not fertility, it's not mortality, it's not even migration, it's the age structure of your population. How is your population distributed across the life course? All right. This is from the 2020 census for Huntington County, okay? They're very easy to read. 0 to 4, that's your preschool. 5 to 9 is your elementary. 10 to 14 is middle. 15, 19 is high school. Now, point of note, you have Huntington University here. College students are counted where they go to school, not where they're from. Been doing that since 1950. So a lot of those 18, 19, then 20 to 24-year-olds in this population pyramid here are college students. They're counted here. We pull them out in our calculations because it keeps, constantly turning over. They're not going to stay here. They're not going to have kids, things like that. Yeah, it's a segment of your population that literally doesn't age. That's one reason why I quit teaching college. Was the only person that was aging on campus was me. Kids all stayed the same, so I'm sure high school teachers feel the same way. Of your, what we call resident or indigenous population, 20 to 34 we refer to as family formation ages. 80% of all births occur to women between the ages of 20 and 34 years old. Despite what you've read in the popular press, fertility rates in this country have not changed much in the last 50 years. They've stayed a nice, tight 15% band between 1.6 and 2.0 kids per woman in her lifetime. 2.1 is replaceable, by the way. When you see changes in number of births of an area, it's not due to changes in birth rate, but changes in the number of women in prime childbearing age. You could have a total fertility rate of 9. If you don't have women in prime childbearing age, you're not going to have any births. The TFR for Huntington County right now is 1.78. So it's pretty far below, and that's even what the college students pulled out. 35 to 54 are the ages where most people have kids in school. So we had the parents here, and of course they're all gone by the time I'm speaking. Most of the parents out there are between those ages, all right? 55 to 69 we refer to as the empty nest households. That's where it gets confusing for people. The Smith family down the road been living there for 10 years ago, there was mom, dad, and 2 kids. But today, the kids have graduated, left high school, going off to college in the big city or something, and it's just mom and dad there. Same house, same owner, but instead of 4 people per household, you only have 2. And that's a big reason why the district had a big drop in household size the last 10 years. You went from 2.52 to 2.40 in 2020. More on that later. 70 to 85 plus, we call it turnover ages. You'll see a slight uptick at 62, another one at 65. Most people don't downsize till they're in their 70s. It's not retirement that triggers downsizing. It's the death of one of the spouses, or they both lose the ability to drive. And there's one thing about living in most of Huntington County, you got to have a car to live out here. So when those 2 things happen, then they have to downsize. House is hard to maintain. They can't get there. They can no longer maintain their lifestyle. So if I have how many homeowners I have in an area and their age structure, how many are over the age of 70, that's a proxy measurement for how many homes will be put on the market the next 10 years. If you note the district pyramid, you've got a large bubble of population in their 60s right now. You go forward 10 years, they're going to be in the 70s. So the number of homes downsizing over the next 10 years is just going to go up. Now, these trends vary between your attendance areas. We call this your demographic fingerprint, because no 2 areas have the exact size and shape of their pop pyramid. And quickly, I want to go through the ones for each attendance area. So next slide, this is Andrews, okay? Again, kind of like the district shape. But also, notice how the 0 to 4 bar is smaller than 5 to 9. We refer to that as the deficit. Very, very common in suburban, exurban areas. If no one moved into the district, or this attendance area, for example, in the next 5 years, you're left to your own demographic devices, the enrollment will drop. Why? Because the cohorts coming up behind it are smaller. Okay? In this particular case, you drop by about probably 40, 50 students in a 5-year period. Now, that won't happen, of course. You have people moving in. But when you see households move in, you can't add it to what you already have in enrollment. You have to fill in that preschool deficit first. Then you grow. That's why there's not a connect between the 2. Next pyramid, or Flint Springs. Gee, guess where Huntington College is at? It's in the Flint Springs attendance area, and it shows up. Okay? It's also an area that has the most apartments. We'll get to that more later. So you don't see a deficit there because there are so many young people that are non-college students. So Flint just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Next slide. Horace Mann, almost a pillar, you know. But again, yes, we start seeing that over 60, or close to 65 bubble of population out there, aging baby boomers that will start downsizing in the next 10 years. Next one, we have Lincoln, again, almost a pillar, but again, a bit of a bubble up in the early 60s, but they've had some in-migration in the early 30s too. Next one, Roanoke. Remember when they built the GM plant out there, everybody thought it could come right across the border to Huntington County. Some did, but they're all now in their 50s and 60s, and they brought their kids with them, and they're all graduating out. Roanoke probably has the biggest 0 to 4 deficit of all your attendance areas because of the aging population out there. And then next one is Salamonie. They do have the oldest population. So Salamonie also has the highest fertility rate of all your attendance areas. I don't know why, and I'm not going to speculate on it, but it just does. But it also has one of the oldest populations. You usually don't see those 2 together. Anyway, moving on. Some of the characteristics here. This is for primarily to show what the district totals are and how much each area deviates from the district total. Only about 27.9, that's pretty good that I can see that from here, of the households have under 18 population. That includes preschoolers. That's even light for a suburban area. Norm's more like about 30, okay? Your household size is 2.40. Now, you went from 252 to 2.4 between 2010 and 2020. 0.12 doesn't sound like a lot, does it? Until you multiply it times 14,000 housing units. If the household size in the district had stayed the same in 2020 that it was in 2010, you'd have 1,700 more people in the district. And a very crude way to measure this, household size, mom, dad, whatever the point is kids in most cases. So the vast majority of that 1,700 fewer people are under 18. That's why you're having the enrollment drops. You are a contributing factor to that. So, and you see a wide range amongst your attendance areas. You know, again, depends on what your housing composition is. Next slide. 31% of the householders are between 35 and 54. That's why it's so hard to get bonds through. You're outnumbered 2 to 1 before you even start. The good news is already you're over 25%, heading for 30% over age 65 population. There's going to be a large wave of existing homes going on the market that haven't probably had school-age kids in them for the last 20 years. You'll start seeing school-age kids coming out of those late this decade, early into the 30s. And then homeowners, 76%, but again, a wide range. You know, the more Salamonie and Roanoke, much higher in the 80s, lower in Flint Springs, which is the urban area. Next slide. Single-person households, 28%. You know, you get an urban core area, it's not surprising. But 15% are single over 65. Those will probably start turning over in the very near term. Next slide. This is my favorite data from the 2020 census. Single year of age. We can identify the number of people in each age cohort. So in 2020, 5-year-olds are your kindergarten. 6 is first grade, 7 is second, 8 is third. This year, your 2-year-olds are now 3 years older. They're your first grade, second, third, fourth. And you can see the size of that deficit, the district total on the bottom. So you had 440 and 424 kindergarten first graders in 2000. You've got 395 and 351 and under 1 and under 2. So you need to have almost 80 kids born in each birth cohort to move in just to break even, okay? That's a pretty healthy immigration flow. And you can also see this, you know, by individual school. People will see, oh, I see a big kindergarten cohort coming in or a small one, we're growing, we're growing. My first thing is a big cohort. Look at Flint Springs, 6-year-olds, 101, it goes on to 94, pops up to 116, then down to 88. You've got these big waves going through, so we compare it to what your enrollment is, we can account for that. It's not growth or decline, not linked to a demographic variable, it's just large cohorts. And the next slide, you'll see how we do a market share for each attendance area. The number across the top is what was counted in the 2020 census. The ones in red are your first grade. So we can see, okay, what proportion of that cohort is in public schools. Now, no school district gets 100% of their kids. You got homeschool, you got virtual, you got charter, you know, things like that. And 2020 is the depths of COVID, so everybody's proportions were down. So going up in 21, 22 is probably a much more accurate representation of non-COVID trends. And if the percentages are going up, it's either in migration or in transfers, or if it's going down, it's out migration, out transfers. So we can calculate your market share, do this by school, and in this case here is for the district total. And this tells us the impact of both your migration trends and what the transfer policies are. The next slide, this is because it's a county, we can use Internal Revenue Service migration data. When you file your taxes, and you change addresses, if your address changes in a county, you moved across county lines, the Bureau puts you in the migrant file. And they now have made this data available for every year back to 1990, okay? So we have long-term trends on this. So this is the in-migration file for Huntington County for the 2021 period. And it shows us number of households, number of people, household size, and their mean income. And most people think migration's long distance. No, the vast majority of it's short distance. And look where their in-migrants are coming from. Allen, Wabash, Wells, Grant, Whitley, Kosciuszko. If it has to be more than 20 households, they'll list it and gives you the relative household size. So you've got 1,702 people moved into the county in that 1 year, from 2000 to 2021. The out-migration file, which is next, you had 1,745 moving back out, about broke even. And where did they go to? Allen, Wells, Wabash, Whitley, Grant, Kosciuszko. That's it. 90 to 95% of migration in and out is within 75 miles. Long distance migration is actually quite rare. So, and again, you see relative household size. We again use this to measure this. And the next slide is to look at the comparison of this over the last 5 years. We took it back to 2010. We just charted these 5. And you can see the net effect is almost zero. So there's as many moving in and as many moving out. And this is a key factor moving forward when we start calculating the population forecast, which is next, I believe. Yes. Each attendance area has a population forecast. Male, female, this is the total, 0 to 4 to 85 plus, all right? And there's 2 ways to read this. You can look at an age group over time. 5 to 9, of course, is your elementary grades. So you've got 2000, 20, 25, 30, 35, you read it across. Or you can read a cohort through time. 0 to 4s in 2020 are 5 to 9s in 2025. They're 10 to 14s in 2030 and 15 to 19s in 2035. Your median age, half the population's older, half the population's younger, about 41, and staying in that range too. The center columns in the bottom are called the components of change. Births, about 1,750 over the 5-year period, and you notice the births stay pretty flat. That's doing pretty well. The deaths go up, not because of a kind of pandemic, but because of an aging population. Below that is a line called natural increase, which is a negative number. Contrary to popular belief, immigration has not been the driver of U.S. population growth the last 250 years. It's been natural increase, excess of births over deaths. Even before COVID happened, we had 4 states and 850 counties in the U.S. with more deaths than births. It's awful hard to grow when you don't have any natural increase. Now, post-COVID, even in Indiana, we've already got 18 counties, and this is one of them with more deaths than births. We're picking up about 2 a year. This is the dominant demographic trend of the next 15 years. Thanks to the aging baby boom for that. Net migration running slightly negative, and a drop in population. The county's population dropped by about 500 people from 2010 to 2020. So this is a continuation of a trend we've seen, not quite as dramatic. The results of this population forecast at the attendance area level, at the district level, goes into the enrollment forecast, which is the next slide, okay? Now, the analogy I use here is a bucket of water. If I have a bucket of water, and I'm pouring water in the top, but there's a hole in the bottom, as long as I'm pouring in faster than the water's going out, the bottom level will rise. But if for some reason the hole in the bottom gets bigger, and it's going out faster than I'm pouring it in, keep pouring in the same rate, level will drop. Enrollment works the same way. What's the size of the K-1 cohorts coming in? What's the size of the 12th grade cohorts coming out? So you look at the relative size of each cohort, and that's one reason you've had some big 12th grade cohorts going out the last, most of the last 10 years. That's going to moderate. After 2028, you're going to start seeing more and more aging baby boomer homes go on the market as they downsize. One of 2 things must happen. They're either going to downsize or they're going to die, one of the 2. So you're either going to have new young households moving in, or a whole bunch of empty housing units around the county. I don't think it's going to be the latter. They will sell, all right? At that point, you're going to start seeing more young households move in with not only school-age kids, but also, more importantly, preschoolers. It'll build up that 0 to 4 deficit. So starting in 2028, 29, you're going to start seeing the elementary enrollment start to creep back up. And that wave will start going through your enrollment. It won't quite get to the high school by 2030 or 2033, but you'll start to see some change in your early elementary groups. So the decline in the district's enrollment will start slowing as we get through the end of the decade, pretty much bottom out in the early 30s. If we took this on about 5 more years, you'd probably start to see it creeping back up again. Probably not back up the levels of 2010, but the decline will end. Now, what can make this go wrong? 30-year fixed rate goes to 8%, 9%, okay? Major recession. Indiana changes the transfer laws again, okay? Big wave of consolidations. GM plant goes under, things like that. There's a lot of possibilities out there. But if the parameters hold, if our assumptions are correct, they usually are, except for the economics, because who knows what they'll do, 2% plus or minus confidence interval around the district number. That's where it should be. 25 minutes, that's not bad for me. I usually go long. Thing with old props, you can't shut them up.
You know, Dr. McGibbon, and I read through this when you sent this to me about 10 days ago or so. It's hard for me not to go to this total K through 13 line there. You know, as we're thinking about budgets and moving forward and doing what we're doing, and you look at that, you know, you're looking at, like you say, over the next 10 years, a slow, steady decline until we get to the start of the next decade with that. And so I was just fascinated to hear your explanation with this. This is probably the 4th or 5th time I've heard you speak on this,
Yeah.
and I've always appreciated your accuracy. If like you said, if all the variables hold true, this helps us tremendously when we are budgeting, when we are looking forward in the future and what we're doing. But is there anything else that stuck out to you about us individually when you were doing this?
Well, you're going to have a lot of company because 75% of all the school districts in Indiana are going to lose enrollment the next 10 years, and probably about 70% nationwide. Births have been dropping for the last 15 years. And those coming in 23, 24, 7 and 8 are graduating out. It's going to amplify it. But even without Indiana's transfer laws, and much as I don't like the transfer,
Correct. Yes. So when you said to me that 75% of the school districts in the state of Indiana will lose students, you know.
I know that's cold comfort, but.
Yeah. Yeah, when I met with you, 2 months ago, you told me that. That's been a number that's still ringing. But I think as we're planning both facility improvements, budgets, and all those type of pieces, this will be data that we will lean on heavily as we are planning going into the future. And I will say to you, thank you. Don't be surprised. I have lots of questions coming up in the near future as we're putting plans together over the next 12 to 18 months. But this will be a big-time driver for us as we're making some of those decisions. Correct.
State don't have 600 kids in them. They're losing that just through transfers.
Right.
You know, so that really is the wild card out here. That hold that number. Getting really aggressive about either cutting their route transfer rates or trying to bring more in. Even if you're successful, that here your demographic trends alone, which is your
Right. Right.
That's why when you had that, when I saw that big bubble of people in the 50s and 60s, your pop pyramid, I'm looking at it going, well, I bet their household size went through the floor. And it did. 1.12 is a big drop in 10.
Right.
So.
Well, there's a few of us just around this table that experienced that. So, so yes. Any other questions for Dr. McGibbon this evening? Thank you. It's always awesome. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
I know we've got a conference call coming up here in the next couple of weeks on a couple of things, but I'll be in touch. I just really, truly appreciate you, so thank you.
I'm sure you'll have more questions then than you have now.
Oh, I will, trust me.
So.
Yep. Okay, trust me.
Sorry about your podium.
No, that's me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item G1, offer to sell and transfer 2 parcels of Salamonie Elementary School property.
Yes, over the last year to 18 months, we have been in discussion with the town of Warren about this agenda item. And so this evening, Joe is here and is going to walk you through this process. So go ahead, Joe.
All I know is now I am terminal as of last Wednesday, according to Dr. McGibbon's statistics.
Yeah, because you turned what, 70?
I turned 70 last Wednesday.
You don't look a day over
so
60, Joe. So.
Can you believe it? I cannot. I'm terminal. Anyway, here on your screen, you can see the footprint of Salamonie School. We own right at 80 acres, which, if you're familiar with the town, obviously on the west is bounded by State Road 5, on the north by 900 South, then it cuts through the woods, and on the south, it's, if you go to right there where the marker, well, go to your left, to the west. Right there is the corner of 12th Street, and then there's a little street there. The street's not, 12th Street's not developed, but it's right at that corner. The Dollar General's to the left, to the west there. Any event, we own 80 some, just right at 80 acres. As Mr. Trout indicated, we have been in discussions with the town of Warren to develop the 2 parcels, which is in response, it's good this follows the demographic study, because one way you grow the population is to have more housing available, not the only factor, as he indicated. So what we're looking at is, and are entering in a letter of intent to transfer, sell a 22-acre parcel right there where there's a cornfield now, and option on an additional 33-acre parcel that has some tillable ground and woods area. The corporation would retain 24.5 acres, which is the basic footprint of Salamonie School, the front yard, the track area to the east, and goes to the woods. This was with the full intent that Salamonie will remain a school in the community, and by hopefully transferring selling these parcels to the town of Warren, who will then in turn enter into agreement with a development to develop single-family housing. If you look to the west of State Road 5, you can see the Heritage Point villas, which you think, wow, that's good, there's all these houses. Well, except for everybody who lives in those are at least, they're more terminal than I am. That's not great, is it? I
No.
forget that I've been public.
You know, everybody in the county is watching Joe.
That's right.
So when my mother calls
Including
me
your mother.
So when my mother calls me on the way home, I'm going to say that
Well,
I didn't say that.
I'm
So-
in the category too. So if you could imagine a housing so that 22-acre parcel would become a housing addition, and then the tillable portion south of the woods would also become a single-family housing addition. I think tonight it's just to bring you up to date of where we're at. Mr. Trout will meet. You authorized him to do this process, and we've been back and forth. We have a letter of intent from the town. They are also meeting tonight. I think just affirmation of us moving forward with this plan to retain 24.5 to 25 acres for the school corporation, enter into a final contract for the sale of the two parcels, or giving the town the option to purchase those parcels for the development of housing. And we've been very specific, it's not for them to construct industrial, it's not retail, it will be for housing is the requirement.
A couple things here that I want the board to know is that currently we have a tenant that is farming the 22 acres here and a little bit here. And so we have an agreement with that tenant through the next season, the farming season. What I'm asking you to approve this evening is just that agreement that we have. If you approve that this evening, and then I would work with Joe and with the town of Warren on a contract, per se, of defining exactly these parcels and defining a few other details that we'd have to have, i.e. surveys, et cetera, et cetera. These are rough approximates. These have not been surveyed out. Like, we may want to have a conversation with Mrs. Kitchen and, about exactly where does this line go right here to make sure that we have ample amount of space for playgrounds and those type of pieces. But just so you know, this evening, this is the first time that we have gone as public as this. The town of Warren is meeting tonight. And what I've got in your board packet this evening is an agreement for us to move forward. This would have to be defined. We'd have to enter into a contract that we would work on, but just for the point of notifying the community and showing our interest with the town of Warren of moving forward, that I'm asking for recommending your approval of that agreement. Joe, am I saying that correctly?
Right, and just a couple of points. Our tenant farmer does have a contract through 24 crop year.
Correct.
And the original letter of intent, we had talked about 18 months ago, and we thought this would go through quicker even, ending it this year. But we had a 3-year contract on that land, so any transfer will be subject to that. It's going to fit into the timelines, I think.
Right.
Nicely. And there was something else.
I don't think we can emphasize the point enough that our commitment to keep Salamonie School there long-term. This is not by happen chance that this follows the demographic study this evening. You can see where I think this is a win-win for both the town of Warren and for us as a school district right along the way too. And so it is enormously important to me that people understand our long-term commitment to that facility. When we talked about the bond tonight and our work with that and our commitment to move into potentially a new HVAC system and moving away from steam that was built in 69 or 70, plus what we're talking about here this evening, I hope, is my intention that that town can see our commitment, our long-term commitment to that facility. And so there's a few other details to work out, but what you have before you this evening is that agreement that I'm recommending for your approval that will just take us through the next steps as we try to define this even further.
And I want to make one final point. Because this is a government entity to government entity transfer, it does not have to be sold at what you would call fair market value. It can be sold at a negotiated price, and the number is $2,500 an acre, I believe. And because it's one government entity, the second government entity, you don't have to go through the same process of appraisals, average the two appraisals. And this is not an offering to the general public.
No.
In other words, another person in the area can says, well, I'm going to give you $10,000 an acre or $20,000 an acre, and I'll development. That's not what we're doing here. We're looking at a cooperative effort with the town of Warren to develop single-family housing for the town of Warren on a government-to-government exchange. And there are also provisions, as you'd see in the agreement, that have for if they don't exercise the option or if they don't develop it into single-family housing, it would be able to revert back to the school corporation. Any question?
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Appreciate the presentation, and we'll entertain an offer regarding the proposed agreement.
I'll make a motion that we approve the offer to sell and transfer the Salamonie parcels to the town of Warren.
Is there a second? Any further discussion before we vote? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the offer.
You died again.
I voted, yeah. Everybody vote?
Just a second, Garrett's coming.
If you refresh your page, Matt, you can see the results.
At the very bottom. It took me out of the meeting when I hit refresh. Well, the motion passed 6-0 with one abstention.
Thank you.
All right, so now we'll go on to G2, HNHS West Parking Lot Change Order.
Board, for your action item tonight, I appreciate Mr. Hurdle enduring the 9 o'clock hour with me tonight. I clearly owe you lunch now, don't I? West Parking Lot at Huntington North is, as you've seen, going through lots of change out there. One of the things I prepped Mr. Trout and Mrs. Smith on was anticipated maybe some stabilization. It's called lime stabilization at $15 per square foot. Tonight, you have on your agenda the actual official change order for that. We do have the funds in the 2020 bond, and those have been, the actual change order will read a maximum of $196,000 minus the, obviously in addition to the $50,000 contingency. So we're asking for a change order of up to $196,000 for the west parking lot for stabilization. If you've seen it, they are in high action out there to get that completed sometime maybe paved right after Thanksgiving. The second final coat, I believe, Rich, would go on sometime in the spring. Is that right, for asphalt? Possibly before? Maybe done before if the weather stays right. So coming to you just to make sure we officially bring the change order to the board.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion regarding the request for approval of the change order?
Make a motion to approve the high school west parking lot change order as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So if, Mr. Thornsberry, if we wouldn't have procrastinated on the west parking lot as long as we did, do you think that we could have prevented having to stabilize it? Well, I know it's not, but he's an architect and he's kind of a guy.
He's trusted here.
Yeah, he is trusted. I mean, either one of you can answer it.
I mean, if we had perfectly dry weather, maybe not as much.
Meaning letting it get so decrepit out there over the years is, I think, what you're asking, right?
Yeah, if we
Letting it
wouldn't have
break
waited,
down the level.
you know, we've talked about the west parking lot years ago, and we kept kicking the can because we didn't have the funds. So had we have done it back then, could we have prevented it, or would it have always been that bad?
Your base was horrible. I mean, there's places out there you may have 3 inches of stone, and other areas 12 inches right now as we're excavating. So the base was not good to begin with.
Okay. Sorry, I lean on you because I trust your.
Sure.
But he's right. What's under the ground you can't control, and it was just hidden.
And board, for your information, the borings did, depending on where they bored, did show some concern, and that's when I went to Mrs. Smith and Mr. Kraut and said, let's save the remaining portion of this. We will probably have an overage, but the 196 is a maximum. It may come in under that. I'll report out once we get it done to that point.
My attitude is that we're not going to cut corners here. What we do, we're going to do the right way. And Matt, I don't want to cut corners. If we're going to do it, let's do it and do it right. And this will ensure that it's done right for a long period of time. I hate spending the extra, up to 196, but I also don't want to come back to this project in a few short years, and when we didn't do it the correct way, and to your point, it'll cost us more money to do it right later. So let's get it in and get it right, and do it the right way, and make sure that it's done correctly for years and years and years to come, so we can move on to other parts of this building then, as we talked earlier this evening. So I agree with you 100%.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the change order. All right, motion passes 7-0. We'll now go to the consent agenda, items H1 through 22.
I'm going to highlight a couple for you. 19 is a lead secretary substitute proposal. This is long overdue. I know how difficult it is for me to do my job when Cindy is not here, and it's that much more difficult for building principals because they lean heavily on their secretary. So we do have a substitute plan for you in your packet this evening. I also want to say thank you for continued donations. This one today, everybody who's donated totals $114,848. Flint Springs is requesting permission to accept 2 donations. The first one in the amount of $628 from Donors Choose to purchase supplies for the first annual etiquette meal for Thanksgiving at Flint Springs. The second donation is in Legos valued at approximately $7,500 from Todd Nightenhelzer at TCB Games to be used for the STEM classes, so thank you to them. Lincoln Elementary School and the HCCSC Food Service is requesting permission to accept a donation of $5,360 from Chastity Masters and Chad Cochran in the name of Theo Cochran Hot Lunch Fund to be used to help students with the negative lunch balance at Lincoln Elementary School. Lincoln Elementary School is also requesting permission to accept a donation of toys valued at approximately $60 from Jesse Brown to be used in the Lincoln Elementary Preschool program. Salamonie Elementary School is requesting permission to accept a grant awarded to Abbey Park in the amount of $492.14 for STEM kits for her fourth grade class from the Indiana Retired Teachers Association, along with a one-year membership to the association. Crestview Middle School is requesting permission to accept two donations. The first one in the amount of $1,500 from Smith Furniture Company to be used to support the robotics program. The second donation in the amount of $600 from Huntington Sheet Metal to be used for the robotics program. And the Huntington Special Services are requesting permission to accept the Robotics for Autism grant in the amount of $99,200 from the IDOAE to be used in the Essential Applied and Behavioral Skills classrooms at Horace Mann Elementary School and Lincoln Elementary School. So I'm requesting permission, your permission for agenda items H1 through 22.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trout. Would anyone like to make a motion regarding the consent agenda H1 through 22?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments, or discussion? Would anyone like to pull out any specific items and vote on them separate from the from those group of items? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the consent agenda items H1 through 22. Motion passes 7-0. We'll now go to item I1, Capital Asset Policies 7450 and 7455.
Yes, I'm recommending for your approval this evening the capital assets policy 7450, which is property inventory, and 7455, which is accounting system for capital assets.
And this is a second reading.
Correct.
With the changes, I think, per Neola, correct?
Correct.
So entertain a motion to approve the changes to these two policies.
Motion to approve the capital asset policies 7450 and 7455 as presented.
Is there a second? Any discussion before we vote? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. Motion passes 7-0. We'll now go to I2, Anti-Harassment Policies.
Yes, I'm recommending for your approval this evening, the second reading and approval of the following. School Board Policies 1662, which is anti-harassment administrators, 3362, anti-harassment professional staff, 4362, anti-harassment support staff, and 5517, anti-harassment students.
All right, as this is also a second reading, I'll entertain a motion regarding these proposed policies.
Motion to approve the anti-harassment policies as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the policies. Motion passes 7-0. We'll now move to item J1, Roanoke Public Library Board Appointment.
On December 31st of this year, Pamela Worrell will have been on the library board for 4 consecutive terms as the school board's appointment. According to the law, that means she must take at least a 4-year break from the library board, Mrs. Bandelier there is requesting Catherine Overmeyer, so I'm recommending your approval of this appointment.
All right, I'll entertain a motion regarding the appointment to the Roanoke Public Library Board.
Motion to approve Catherine Overmeyer for the Roanoke Library Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. Motion passes 7-0. Now go to item J2, Library Board appointment with Northern Wells School Corporation.
That's correct. Our appointment of Doug Denny will expire on 12/31/23. Doug is interested in being reappointed, so I'm recommending him for your approval to this position.
All right, I'll entertain a motion regarding the appointment to Huntington City-Township Public Library Board.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Mr. Denny to the Huntington City Township Public Library Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the appointment. Motion passes 7-0. Now go to K1, School Board Meeting Calendar for 2024.
Board, what I'm recommending for your approval this evening is the proposed 12-month calendar for January 2024 through December 2024. You will notice, and our public will too, that this is a significant change from what we have done before in the past. What I am recommending is that we move to a school board meeting once a month and then to a work session once a month. The school board meetings will still start at 7:00 p.m. They'll all meet right here. But the second meeting of the month, except for January, because the first meeting is an organizational board meeting, that's required by law. The second meeting on the most months then would be a work session. As you can tell by the length of the meeting this evening, we have so much business as it pertains to certain topics that we just need, in my estimation, more time to openly discuss what needs to be discussed in a public meeting. A work session is different than a regular board meeting from the standpoint of that we will not be taking public input, we will not be voting on matters, we will literally be discussing items in the public for that. We will meet here. Those work sessions will start at 6:00 p.m. And what we will do is we will openly discuss the business that we need to conduct within that. For an example this evening, just to give you a couple of indicators, you notice from Mr. Thornberry, there is a lot of facility-related items that we have got to work through. We need to be able to talk with Mrs. Smith on a variety of topics related to those items. And what we need your assistance from moving forward to is how would you want to align the resources available to the projects that are forthcoming? That's just one example of how we could utilize this time together. I promise you I'll keep it to 90 minutes during those work sessions. We will discuss 1 to 2, probably no more than 3 topics openly. We will not vote, we will take minutes, but we will not be conducting business as normal. What we will be doing is informally talking about working through a variety of board-related issues that will probably be upcoming for board votes. If you look at that, probably the contract with the town of Warren will come up next year that we will have to work through as we work through, are you comfortable, for example, where the survey lines are at? Are you comfortable with what the agreement says? And so much of that, I would love to have more conversation about what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, what all that needs to happen so we can take more time and work through all of those. The anomaly to this would not be in the months of August, September, and October. We need to keep having 2 board meetings a month there so we can meet the budget adoption timelines for the calendar. Okay, so that's what my proposal is for you this evening, is to move to 9 months out of the year, 1 board meeting a month, and then a work session. There are a couple months where we're only meeting once. That would be, we'd have in July, for example, we're having 1 board meeting and not a work session. And if you go down to December, you'll notice that we're also not having a work session that month, just a board meeting that month. So we're following some of the regular calendar, but moving the second meeting, so many of those months, into a work session format. So that's my recommendation for you this evening, Mr. Roth.
All right, thanks, Mr. Trout. Board, I'll entertain a motion regarding the proposed meeting dates for 2024.
Motion to approve the January through December 2024 meeting calendar, school board meeting calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion before we vote? All right, hearing none, we'll vote on the motion to approve the 2024 schedule, and thank you, Mr. Trout, for putting that together.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes 7-0. Item K2, items of discussion by board members. A lot of info tonight and a lot to take in, so thank you everyone for your patience this evening with a longer meeting. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.